Hey guys, what's up? It's Duncan here, KH Fan. I got my laptop back, so I'm doing videos with my webcam right now. Um, Thought I'd get this out of the way and do my honorable mentions of 2012. And yes, there will actually be 12 honorable mentions. So I just decided to spice up the video a little bit with doing 12 of them. So without further ado, let's get going. Um, the first album on this list is Kolos by Meshuggah. Now, Meshuggah, I mean, a lot of you are going to be surprised that this is not going to be in my top 20. Reason being is because it hasn't had that replay ability for me, at least. It has for some of my fellow reviewers, but just not for me. It's a great album nonetheless, but it's just not as it kind of feels like Meshuggah could have done a lot better with this record, in my opinion. I mean, don't get me wrong, this is definitely a great album for sure, and it's also one of the heaviest albums I've heard. Like when I put it on for the first time and heard the song "I Am Colossus," my freaking balls deflated. Not trying to be funny or disgusting, but that's just what happens when I listen to Meshuggah because they're so damn heavy. I really liked the performance on this with Yen's vocals. Thomas Hake's drumming was amazing as always. Polyrhythms on this album are sick. The guitars are just god awfully heavy. It's ridiculous how heavy this album is, but it's definitely an honorable mention in my opinion. It's a great album. Check it out if you haven't. So yeah. Next up on my list is Aeon's Black by Aeon. Now this kind of was an introduction to the band for me. I've never really listened to this band before, but then I was like, oh, then I saw that I think it was Metal Blade that posted a site that they were streaming the album live, and I listened to it for the first time, and wow, this album was absolutely ball crushing. Um, I think I'm familiar with their drummer Nils. He's not in the band. I don't think he's in the band anymore. I think he's only in Dark Funeral. He wasn't on this record, as far as I know, because I watched the album, like the videos you see when bands are making albums, like because Nils is a left-handed drummer and the drummer that was playing on the record is a right-handed drummer. So yeah, the drums are ridiculously heavy on this record, fast, aggressive, destructive, etc. It's a very pissed off record, and it's very very good straight up death metal. I highly recommend checking this one out. Um, Next up, we have Eclipse by Veil of Maya. Now, this was definitely a step up from their last album, Id, which, in my opinion, is their worst album. I wouldn't say it's like a bad album, honestly, but it's definitely a okay album. But this was a lot better. Production on this was pretty damn good. I thought Mark Akubo's guitar playing was fantastic on this record as compared to last one. Um, the drumming is the typical Veil of Maya drumming with ridiculous like double bass patterns with going along with the guitars. Um, Brandon's vocals sound pissed off. Sorry, my fucking phone, Facebook's going off. Um, so yeah, it's typical. It's people call it deathcore, but I really don't consider them deathcore. I just call them progressive, like metalcore, some sort. But yeah, it's a pretty good album. You should definitely check it out. Next up, we have Soulfly with Enslaved. Now, this definitely was a step up from their previous album, Omen, because now they have two new members in the band. Tony Campos on bass, who used to play for Static X, and Dave Kincaid, formerly of Bortnagar and Malevolent Creation. And those guys added a huge dynamic to Soulfly. I think it's great that Soulfly decided to have a little bit of death metal influence on this record. Max Cavalera sounds as pissed off as any ever, and it's probably the best that he's sounded probably since his Sepultura days. I won't lie about that. Mark Rizzo's guitar playing is fantastic solo wise. Max came up with some really killer riffs on this album, and it also features a couple guest vocalists from such as Travis Ryan of Cattle Decapitation and Dez Fafara of Double Driver and Cold Chamber. Next up, and also check that out. Next up, we have the self-titled release by Whitechapel. I'm a little on the fence with this when it comes to comparing like their previous work. It's not as good as like say Somatic Defilement or This Is Exile, but I'm not expecting it to sound like either of those records because honestly, all their records sound different in their own way. Um, this featured their new drummer for the first time, Ben Harkerode, who used to play for a band called Knights in the Abyss. His drumming is absolutely phenomenal on this record. Um, it's definitely a step up. Well, he's a much. I mean, I've seen Whitechapel live like a couple times recently, and he's a lot better than Kevin Lane. And no disrespect to Kevin Lane, that guy's a phenomenal drummer, and he came up with really killer parts on previous albums. Phil Bozeman's vocals, I think, are getting a lot more clearer. Like you can actually understand what he's saying more, a lot more than the previous albums. And guitars are pretty damn good on this record. I mean, it's still heavy. There's more solos on it. It's really good. The bass is pretty audible on this, if I can remember, because I haven't really listened to the album much lately. But it's definitely worth checking out if you like Whitechapel. Next up on our list, we have Plains of Oblivion by Jeff Loomis. Yes, we all know who Jeff Loomis is, former lead guitar player for the band Nevermore, who sadly broke up, which really, really sucks because they really need to get back together. I really never listened to Jeff Loomis's solo stuff, but when I heard this album, I was completely blown away. Me not being a guitar player, it was a very, very shred-tastic, mind-blowing guitar record. It featured a lot of guests on this album, including one of my favorite guests was actually this female. I forgot her name. Her name's Christina. I keep forgetting her last name, but she's a fantastic vocalist. I forget which songs that she performed on. And it also included other guest spots from actually two former Megadeth guitar players, Chris Poland, who played on the first couple records, and also The System Has Failed, and of course my favorite Megadeth guitar player of all time, Marty Friedman, who in my opinion is the best metal guitar player ever. And that just adds a real big bonus. And also features Ihsahn, the vocalist from the former vocalist for the band Emperor, who used to be around, and he sounds killer on this record for the song that he's on. So if you guys are into really shredding guitars, you should definitely check this album out. You will not be disappointed. Next up, I was expecting this album to be a little better than I expected. I mean, it was a great album, but it didn't quite make my top 20. This one will be Demonocracy by Job for a Cowboy. Now, don't get me wrong, this album is fan-fucking-tastic. I think Job for a Cowboy has really stepped up their game over the last few years. I mean, they're pretty much like a fine wine. They just get better with age. I think Johnny Davi's vocal performance is the best he's ever done. The guitars are absolutely insane on this record, and the Charn Rice's drumming is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, that guy's a fucking monster on drums. All in all, this is really good. I think it's, in my opinion, is just as good as the Gloom EP that came out a year ago. It's definitely a step up from Ruination, in my opinion, but that's just me. But it's, for me, it's not as good as Genesis, which is by far my favorite Job for a Cowboy release. So if you like death metal, I mean, this is a good technical death metal album. You should definitely check it out if you haven't. Next one is a late bloomer. I reviewed this. This was the last album I reviewed of this year, and that is Spiritual Genocide by Destruction. Now, if you guys aren't familiar, they're part of the big three of like Teutonic thrash metal in Germany, with Kreator and Sodom along with them. Destruction really outdid themselves on this record. I mean, they have a new drummer who played on the last record, but he was still kind of a new member, so to speak. For a three-man thrash band, this is actually a really, really good release. I thought this album absolutely punished my mind. It was ridiculous. I mean, the drumming was absolutely phenomenal. The new drummer is fucking killer. I forget his name. And fucking Schmier sounds really, really pissed off on this record. His bass playing is really good on this record, and Mike's guitar playing is absolutely out of this world for when it comes to thrash. I mean, he's one of the best thrash metal guitar players there is, and he proves it on this record. So if you guys like thrash metal, you should definitely check this one out. Next up, we have Equilibrium by God Forbid. Now, this album took me completely by surprise. I don't know how, but it did. I didn't expect this album to be as good as it was. I mean, I just decided I'm going to buy it when it came out, and I did. And when I did, I mean, as soon as the first song kicked in, I was just like, whoa, these guys really stepped up their game from their last album, Earth's Blood. It sounds pretty pissed off for Byron's vocals and his lyric writing. This is also the first album they have done without their previous guitar player, Dallas Coyle, whose brother is Doc Coyle in the band. So they have Mike Wickland, who used to play for Himza, on guitar, and him and Doc did a very, very good job with guitar parts on this record. Corey's drumming is ridiculous on this record compared to previous records, but he's always been a killer drummer to begin with. So props to God Forbid for putting out a really fantastic album. Next up, we have As I Lay Dying with Awakened. I expected this album to be a little better than it turned out to be, but it fell a little short of my top 20. I mean, I love As I Lay Dying, as many of you know. I've seen them live finally after listening to them since I was 14 years old, 13 or 14, I think. And after seeing them live, and I was excited for the record. I think this record is really, really good, but the production could have been a lot better, in my honest opinion. And other things, I think Tim Lambesis' vocals have gotten much better. I mean, his vocals get better with each record. I thought his vocals on the Powerless Rise were amazing, and now he stepped it up on this one. Guitars are ridiculous as usual on recent records, and the drumming is the typical As I Lay Dying drumming. So if you guys like metalcore like that, you should definitely check out As I Lay Dying's new album, Awakened. Number 2, we have 3 Inches of Blood with Long Live Heavy Metal. Now, if you guys don't remember or not know yet, I'm a huge old school metal fan. So this album was definitely a really good album to listen to this year. It just brings you back to like the old style of metal from like the 70s and early 80s. I mean, these guys blend really old school elements of like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden into their sound, and it just sounds so perfect for them. The Cam Pipes on vocals, I mean, he's got that Rob Halford range right there, like a mix of Rob Halford and King Diamond, if you will. Um, the guitars are solid as hell. It sounds like I said, old school metal. The drumming is extremely solid. It's probably the best drumming I've heard in 3 Inches of Blood since Fire Up the Blades. I think that's the name of the album, but that came out in like what, 2007, I think. And that was a fantastic record. So if you guys are like into old school metal, you should definitely check this album out. And last but certainly not least on my honorable mentions, Kyo no Yokan by the Deftones. This album was amazing. The reason I just haven't listened to it enough for it to be in my top 20, but I've listened to it enough that it should be on my list somewhere for like honorable mentions. I mean, the Deftones are the Deftones. They do whatever they do it well. It's a very calming record as compared to like their previous album, which was Diamond Eyes, which I thought was fucking mind blowing. But then again, everything they've done has been amazing. It reminds me a lot of the White Pony days. For that, I mean, it's a really calming record. I mean, there's some really heavy moments in this record, like songs like Poltergeist. So, and Chino's vocals, man. I mean, everything he does turns to fucking gold, in my opinion. I think he's a great vocalist. Um, Excuse me, my voice is cracking a little bit. The guitars are just pretty damn heavy for this for an album this calming, but it's whatever. But yeah, that's all I really got to say about the new Deftones. So if you guys haven't listened to the new Deftones, I highly suggest you do. So that is my honorable mentions of 2012. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for subscribing. Thanks for watching my long ass video here. I will talk to you later. Look forward to videos of best concerts of the year, and of course my top 20 of the year, which you guys have all been looking forward to. Hope to see you guys then. Other than that, I'll see you guys later. Peace out. Keep it metal.